Welcome to Widow Dads Building Chapter 2, a Dads Left Behind podcast for young widowers who are looking for hope, support, and direction as they rebuild their lives, their faith, and ultimately create a life they want to live again. With your host, Weston Brandon.
Welcome to another episode of Dads Left Behind mini-series, Widow Dads Building Chapter 2. Last episode we talked about changing jobs, how that's a pretty common thing that all of us end up having to deal with. This episode I want to take a little bit of a turn. Admittedly, this could have been episode 2, but as I'm going through the material of what I think is most important to share, I forgot one of the big things that every widowed person has to go through. And I overhauled my episode list, and I decided, I'm like, nah, this one, we got to talk about this one before we go much further. Like I said, this is raw, unfiltered, unedited, so you just get it as it comes out of my brain from being in this community, in this world for a number of years. This next one that I want to talk about is, there's been a theme of not getting stuck on the edge of that cliff, right? Well, there's also a number of widows and widowers that I have been around and spoken to and seen how they've gone through things that get stuck not even taking the first few steps. Those first few steps go right along with getting a new job, right along with getting other things, and it's just figuring out how to move forward to make your life yours now, and not making your life a shadowed memory of your wife. One of the most important things that we have to deal with at some point, and the sooner the better usually, is going through all of our wife's belongings. Now that's a heavy process. There's no getting around it. You got to do it at some point, right? A lot of you listening to this might have already done something like that, or some of you might be thinking of exactly the things that you know you should probably get rid of, but you haven't been able to convince yourself to get around to doing yet. So I'm going to tell you how I did it. And I took some advice from some other people to do it this way. And it was very effective for me. Didn't make it any less heavy, but it helped me to be able to process those things effectively. So the first area that I had to go through that was really hard on me was our master bathroom. Because some of the hard things to get rid of were some of her clothes and some of her, things that she liked, some of her, like her Stanley mug that she always drank her Dr. Pepper out of, and those types of things, yeah. But the things that were really, really hard for some reason was the things in our master bathroom. Things like her hairbrush, her curling iron, her makeup stuff, all of the just bunch of crap that women use, right, was still hanging out in the drawers in my bathroom. It took me a minute to get around to going through that, because that was yet another thing that felt like losing her all over again, getting rid of that. But I knew that if I didn't, that I would stay stuck right there and wouldn't be able to emotionally move forward at all. So at the advice of a friend, I went through all of her items slowly and completely on my own. I didn't have anybody else with me. I grabbed a big garbage can and I took it into our master bathroom. And I started pulling out items out of her side of the counters and in the drawers and everything that she used every day. I pulled out, 3 or 4 different hairbrushes, her toothbrush, her toothpaste, a couple of different mirrors, feminine hygiene products, everything, right? See, that this is even like hard for me to talk about right now, and I'm 7.5 years out. The most difficult thing about that was every item that I picked up, a flood of memories would come back of her using whatever that item was. But I knew that if I didn't intentionally say goodbye to those things, give space to feel it, that I would continue to feel it forever. So I sat in a chair that I brought in there next to this big garbage can, and I pulled items out one at a time, and I held each item in my hand, and I looked at it, and I recalled memories of my wife using it until I felt like I had thought of everything that I could think of, and I let myself feel how much I missed those things, and I could feel attachment growing to the thing right there, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't want to get rid of this, the memories, even though they're, before she passed away, they would have been pointless memories, but now they're treasured memories, right? And I would look at that item, and I'd give it a kiss, in a way, kind of symbolically giving a kiss to my wife. I would kiss that thing goodbye, along with the memories of those things, and I would throw it kind of ceremonially into the garbage can. And I did that with her hairbrushes. The hairbrushes were, for some reason, really hard because all of her hair was still stuck in them, And so for the first hairbrush, I was like, oh, I have to clean it out for some dumb reason. I was pulling all the hair out of it and throwing the hair away. And then I realized, well, I'm just going to throw this thing in the garbage can anyways. I don't need to do that. But I did the same thing with the hairbrushes. I would find a memory of her using that particular hairbrush. And I would intentionally, hold it in both my hands and purposely say goodbye to the thing and put it in the garbage can and intentionally try to let go of that thing emotionally. And after going through the entire bathroom of all of these things, one of the hard things to get rid of was a particular perfume that my wife liked to wear. So that smell reminded me of her. Smell is one of the most powerful emotional memory recallers out of all of our senses. So the perfume was excruciating to get rid of, but I knew that one was going to be a hard anchor. What would I do with it? Sit there and sniff it all the time and try to get high off of perfume, or who knows? But I knew I had to get rid of that too. So, and I followed that same model going through all of her things. And then I got to the master closet where all of her clothes were. And I knew some of these clothes had value, that maybe some of her family members would like them. So I had her mom come over and take some of the stuff and that she might want to keep to use to make memorial things out of. And then I gathered a bunch of her shirts and things that, at the advice of my mother, I could give to somebody to make some memory quilts out of, little memorial things for us. So I kept the ones that I wanted to use for those, and then I put everything else in a bag, and I got a hold of our church home and asked if there was anybody in our community church that might need some clothes, and luckily there wasn't anybody that was in dire need of those at the moment, so I took them to Goodwill and I donated them. And I used those opportunities to intentionally try to emotionally let go of the items, because one of the things that we get stuck on in grief is that we attach our grief to inanimate objects that had something to do with our wife or a child that we lost or a parent or whatever. It doesn't really matter in the grief, but since I'm talking to young widowers like myself, your wife, you have to realize or you have to recognize that you're getting attached to things that aren't them. And that getting rid of those things is not in any way getting rid of them. You can keep the memories, you can keep the love, you can keep everything. You can keep them with you while getting rid of all of the things that aren't them. Now, there's a whole bunch of other stuff that's going to happen with that. There's going to be people that loved them, that cared about them. They're going to want certain things. So some of the drama that might come up is members of your wife's family or your own family, your kids, right? If you have a daughter or a son that wants to keep particular items, then you are essentially like the executor of this unofficial trust of your wife's stuff, right? And you have to decide who gets what and how. And when you're in the middle of that, it's going to be heavy. It's going to be hard to think straight. And you might just start like, yeah, take whatever you want. Take whatever you want. Be very careful about that, because there are many, many people that have done that have then regretted letting go of those things that were their spouses. Myself included. The particular items don't matter, but we, like most of us, just in that way, we're like, yeah, okay. We're either like, no, we're holding on to literally everything, nobody can have anything, or we're like, get rid of everything kind of thing. It's hard to be like a healthy medium. But I'll just leave you that warning to be intentional and be careful about that. People that want stuff, tell them like, hey, I'm not going to say no, but I'm going to say like, let me get everything together and get my thoughts together and get all the stuff and figure out who all wants what, and then like I'll figure out how to adequately disperse the things that we want to keep, and then let other people get some stuff before we, take all the rest of it to Goodwill or Salvation Army, or here in Utah to the DI kind of thing. The other thing that might be helpful is if you didn't have life insurance or something like that and you're hurting for cash, there might be some valuable things that were your spouse's that you can sell, that people would want to purchase. And that's totally fine. Sometimes, now I didn't run into any of this. There was nothing of my wife's that I wanted to sell, but I have, spoken with or worked with a number of widows and widowers that have sold some of those things. And that can cause a little bit of a drama in its own right with family members of selling the things versus donating the things and all those kinds of things. Just remember that, like, if you feel like you have your head on straight and you can make logical decisions, to just do with what your gut says you should do. And that's all that really matters. The other thing that we can get attached to is literally the space that we're living in. Last episode, we talked about career changes and how to go about those. That's a change in the job is usually one of the very, very first things that we go through. And moving to a new place is extremely common as well, and is often done fairly early on in the process. Sometimes those go hand in hand, literally because the job takes you to live somewhere else, obviously. But other times, we stay there, and if you've got multiple children, you don't want to uproot them from their school and everywhere that they're at and make things harder than they already are. But staying in that particular place has a tendency to attach us to the past anyways, attach us to the ghosts that we wish were still around. Now, many people stay living in the same home and do just fine. I'm not saying that it's bad to stay in the same place. I'm just saying you need to be careful and be very well aware of what's going on in your head and in the heads of your children when you decide to stay there. The other thing that's going to throw a curveball in this is when you do get around to dating again, inviting another woman into that space where your wife that was her home, that is going to be a difficult thing for her to deal with. Now, a great, wonderful woman, I mean, guys, I hope you can find someone as amazing as Kearsley is for me, because she is an absolute angel, but even she deals with a little bit of jealousy, and that is totally normal. You can't blame them for feeling a little bit of jealousy there, right? Like, every woman deserves to be your number one, okay? So, when you get to this phase of dating again and inviting somebody over, how you have your home set up could make a big difference if you're going to stay there at all. Like I said in the previous episode, there's a particular kind of memorial spot in our home that has pictures of my late wife there and all of our family photo albums and everything. It's all in one dedicated space. That's what I recommend to any guy that I'm coaching, is to have one dedicated space where that is where your memories go. That is where she goes to be honored, and that space is hers, and it's usually shared with other stuff with the family. But then the rest of the house, if we're intentionally moving forward with another relationship, It might be hard to hear right now, but it's not. It doesn't usually work having pictures of our wife throughout the entire house when we're trying to start another relationship. Not that someone should feel threatened by that. It's just they don't feel like they are at the forefront of your mind. You know what I mean? Like, just take this for an example. We're going to have the next episode is actually going to be the whole dating, remarriage, and the judgment nobody talks about. But just for the sake of getting attached to things, right? This is another thing that we can't. It's just the atmosphere that we live in. If you were dating a woman who had, now I say this with the utmost respect because I hated when people would use the word ex because it's not what they are, right? And I'm not referring to our ex-wives as ex, but I'm saying if the roles were flipped and you were dating a woman and she had pictures of her ex around, obviously that's ridiculous, right? Now, if you were dating somebody and she had lost her husband and she had pictures of him everywhere, that's a little bit different scenario, right? We can be a little bit more okay with that. But if every room you walked into had a shrine to their late spouse and they're trying to build a relationship with you, does that not feel like it's a little bit incongruent? And it feels a little bit that way because it is. Because it makes it feel like they're not giving you their 100% full attention. Right? Now, that could be true or that could not be true, but that's just how it comes off. So I want you to be careful with that. And oftentimes, one of the best things that a widow or widower has done is when they've began a new relationship, they've sold their home and moved somewhere else to start their own life in their own home that is completely theirs. And then they bring their little memorial spot with them. They make a little spot in their new home that's meant to memorialize who they've lost and where they can go to think about and talk to and spend some time with your late wife. Now, take all that with a grain of salt. That's just the opinion of Weston Brandon on how he suggests that you do it. The only thing I'll say is that it's not just my opinion based off of my personal experience. That's also an opinion formed based off of the experience of a lot of other widows and widowers that have been around for 7-8 years. So I'll just leave it there. I don't want to make these episodes too crazy long. This one will be a little bit shorter, but I just want you guys to know and to be aware of ways that your subconscious mind will try to anchor itself on the memories, onto inanimate objects, and into the environments that you spend your time in. And if you really want to move forward, you want to create a new life that's happy for both you and your children, then there is an extremely effective way to move forward with that by changing your environment, making it new, making it yours, one that you own, but also having a space within that new environment that completely honors your wife and that she will always be there. She will always be a part of your family, always be a part of your lives. But it's such a liberating feeling when you finally take control and do things because you want to do them, because that's how you want them to be. Just be careful that when you think that you want to keep them all the same, it's not out of some deep hidden sense of duty that is kind of ill-founded. So, in the next episode, we'll talk about that dating, the remarriage, the judgment that nobody talks about, all the crazy drama that you might run into, and how to go about having those types of conversations with a woman that you might be dating, how to go about even finding someone like that. And if you are thinking that you need some help with some of this process of figuring out exactly what you want your Chapter 2 to look like and how to make it happen, please join our free Facebook group, Widowed Dads Building Chapter 2. It's facebook.com/groups/widowed dads. And any guy that joins that group, I mentioned in the last episode, any guy that joins that group can have a few Zoom calls with me totally for free to kind of walk through this process for you and figure out, like, come up with a plan, come up with a vision and a to-do list of what it's going to take to make that vision happen, and be around some other guys that are supportive, and then hop on our monthly Widowed Dad Huddle. That's the last Monday of every month. at 7 p.m. Mountain Time. You join that Facebook group, and you'll see the details right there in the featured post tab of the group. And hopefully, if you're listening to this 5-10 years down the road, the group's still going around. If this podcast episode is still up, then that means it's still there, because if I ever, for some reason, change things and stop doing that, then this episode's going to be edited, okay? But please join us, get some support with other guys that are going through it and have gone through it, and try not to get too attached to things that hold you back in the past. We'll catch you in the next one.
This has been an episode of Widow Dads Building Chapter 2, a Dads Left Behind podcast for young widowers with your host, Weston Brandon. Thanks for listening.